The events begin in 1925. Bertie is very nervous before the public speech, but his wife Elizabeth is always there to support him. The courtiers encourage His Royal Highness, advising him not to rush. The royal announcer from BBC announced the start of the closing ceremony, which was attended by many high-ranking people from aristocratic circles. Bertie was invited to the airwaves to address the kingdom's subjects for the first time. The Duke is very nervous as he has major diction problems. The red light came on, indicating that the sound recording was on, and it was time to deliver the speech. Bertie tried very hard, but it didn't go well. He stuttered badly, which was an innate speech defect. The audience remained silent. Elizabeth couldn't hold back her tears. The story then takes us to 1934 in London. A doctor suggests that Bertie smoke to calm his nerves and overcome his stuttering. The doctor also asks the Duke to put glass balls in his mouth, as was done in ancient Greece. Seeing this, Elizabeth realizes that such treatment methods will not help her husband. As expected, Bertie, experiencing the doctor's dubious method of treatment, did not succeed. Bertie was desperate, not knowing what to do. However, Elizabeth was not about to give up. Soon she secretly visited a speech therapist's home. Lionel Logue greeted the woman casually. She told him about her husband's problem, who had already been treated by all the doctors in Britain. The problem is that he needs to speak in public.
Perhaps you should change jobs.
Elizabeth replied that her spouse could not do this because he is the Duke of York. Lionel was shocked to hear this. He only now realized that he was talking to Her Highness. Elizabeth appointed a meeting with the doctor at their residence. It turned out that the Duchess had reached the speech therapist through recommendations. He uses non-standard treatment methods, but this requires complete trust from the patient and equality. Therefore, the treatment sessions will take place here, on his territory. In the evening, Lionel told his family that he had an unusual visitor today. However, he had no right to give details, for the Duchess told him to keep it a secret. In the evening, Bertie's daughters asked him to tell them a fairy tale. Because of his stutter, it was very difficult for him, but he did it. The daughters were happy. Later, Elizabeth told her husband about Lionel and his unconventional methods of treatment. Bertie was not enthusiastic about the idea, as he was tired of useless attempts. Meanwhile, Lionel tried to audition for the local theater troupe. Lionel has excellent diction, but he was denied a role in the play because of his age. Elizabeth finally convinced her husband to visit the doctor. They were greeted by a boy who was also one of Lionel's patients. He used to be unable to say a word, but now he speaks almost freely. The doctor invited Bertie into his office. The atmosphere here was very different from the luxury to which the aristocrat was accustomed. It was unexpected for Bertie to be asked to tell a joke. Lionel behaved very casually and offered the patient tea. He disregarded titles and addressed the prince not as Your Highness but by his name. When Bertie smoked, Lionel strongly advised him to quit this habit. Bertie was puzzled because all the doctors he had visited before claimed that it relaxed the throat. Lionel asked Bertie to tell him about his earliest memory. The doctor paid no attention to the Duke's irascibility, who did not like personal questions. Lionel is convinced that Bertie did not always have a speech defect. Calming down, the Duke said that he began stuttering at around 4 years old. When speaking to himself, Bertie does not stutter. Lionel proposed a bet to the patient, assuring him that he would be able to read the text without stuttering right now. At the same time, the doctor intended to make a sound recording, putting headphones with music on Bertie. Thus the Duke could not hear what he was saying. However, Bertie considered all of this to be meaningless. He refused to listen to the recording of his own voice, saying that such methods of treatment did not suit him. Lionel still gave him the recording as a souvenir. King George V is recording his Christmas radio greeting. It is Bertie's turn. The Duke does not believe he can do it, but he is willing to try at his father's request. George V says that their family is in an extremely difficult situation. Bertie's brother, the future king, has divorced his wife and intends to marry a married woman. The king is strongly against this marriage. Hitler has come to power, and Europe is on the brink of war. If Bertie's brother continues to neglect his duty, he will have to become king himself. Bertie tried to read a speech for the radio broadcast, but he failed. In the evening, out of desperation, he finally listened to the recording of his voice given to him by the doctor. Surprisingly, Bertie spoke absolutely clearly on the recording. Elizabeth was shocked when she heard it. The next day, the couple returned to Dr. Lionel to continue treatment. Bertie promised to be a diligent patient. The Duke also asked the doctor to attend some of his public appearances. The sessions had to be daily for effectiveness. From now on, Lionel and Bertie practiced every day. Bertie began to have his first successes in public speaking. Elizabeth helped her husband in everything, participating in the treatment. Lionel used radical methods, but it was the only thing that could help Bertie. In 1936, Bertie met with his brother David. Now Bertie's speech was much clearer. King George V was very ill. The advisors read him royal decrees, but George could not understand anything because of his health condition. In the evening, David talked for a long time on the phone with his beloved Wallace. A dinner was held. Many aristocrats advised David not to marry Wallace and not to abdicate the throne. King George V passed away that same night. Now David must ascend the throne. The man burst into tears. Despite the disagreements, he loved his father. David does not know what to do. He does not want to leave his beloved woman for the throne. Bertie has no idea how to help his brother. The radio announced the king's demise. Soon Bertie paid a visit to Lionel, but not for a treatment session. They mourned the late king. Bertie, grieving for his father, cannot hold back his tears. It is a great relief for him that David has become king, but there are concerns that he may abdicate the throne soon. Bertie has always been very friendly with his brother. The Duke admitted that speech was not his only defect in childhood. He had previously had twisted knees and had to undergo very long treatment, which was painful. Bertie also recalled the nanny who loved David very much, but hated him. She often treated him cruelly. The parents only noticed this after 3 years. It was then that his stuttering problems began. Bertie had another brother, Johnny, who suffered from epilepsy. He passed away at the age of 13. Lionel was the first commoner with whom Bertie could speak freely. Other people perceived him solely as a prince. On the way to Balmoral Castle in Scotland, Bertie recited tongue twisters aloud to practice his diction. Elizabeth did not want to pay a visit to the king because she considers his lover a terrible woman. Lady Simpson greeted the couple at the royal court, but Elizabeth made it clear that she did not intend to communicate with her. David was having fun without thinking about anything. All the guests wondered what a woman like Lady Simpson had charmed him with. Bertie, who does not like that the brother neglects his royal duties, tried to talk to him. The threat of a large-scale war in Europe is now more relevant than ever. Since Hitler came to power, the whole world has been living in fear. However, David doesn't care about that. He only cares about pleasing his beloved. Bertie was shocked to learn about his brother's intention to marry Wallace, who had filed for divorce from her husband. The brothers quarreled. When Bertie was nervous, he started stuttering again. He told Lionel about this problem. Bertie cannot allow David to bring their country to disaster, so he must learn to answer him with dignity. Lionel's office is the only place where Bertie can be himself, as it is not appropriate for aristocrats to show their emotions. Lionel suggested that his patient take a walk. Bertie told him about Wallace, who had entangled David with her charms. Lionel thinks that Bertie would have been a much worthier king than David. Bertie was enraged by this statement, as it was a treason. Announcing that their lessons were over, Bertie left. At his residence, the Prime Minister expressed concern about the situation. As the head of the Anglican Church, David had no right to marry the woman who had been divorced twice. If the king continues to ignore the advice of his ministers, they will be forced to resign. This means that the country will be left without a government. Lionel is saddened by the quarrel with Bertie. The doctor is convinced that the Duke could become a truly great man if he wasn't afraid. Lionel tried to meet with Bertie to apologize for their last conversation, but the Duke refused to receive him. In the evening, Bertie met with Winston Churchill, the First Lord of the Admiralty, who said that Parliament would not approve the marriage of the king and Wallace. They are also very concerned about David's neglect of his direct duties, while their country is on the brink of war with Germany. This means that Bertie will have to become the next king of England. From now on, he will be called George VI, after his father. As it turned out, David was not against abdicating the throne. His desire to marry Wallace was much stronger than his royal ambitions. Soon David signed the documents, officially abdicating the throne. The crown now belongs to Bertie, and Elizabeth will become his queen. Stressful days began for Bertie. He immediately began his royal duties. On December 12, 1936, he was due to speak to his ministers. Bertie was very afraid that he would stutter again due to nervousness. And that's exactly what happened. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and the children were preparing to move to the royal residence. From the look on her husband's face as he returned home, the Queen realized that his speech to the ministers did not go very well. Bertie only now realized what a huge responsibility had fallen on his shoulders. The upcoming coronation ceremony especially worries him. Bertie couldn't stand it any longer and began to cry. The wife embraced him, saying that everything would be all right. Together they would overcome everything. Soon the royal couple visited Lionel. Bertie wanted to reconcile with his friend and continue the treatment. Lionel was determined to do everything possible to help Bertie overcome his fear of himself. When Lionel's wife returned home, she was deeply shocked to see the Queen. All this time, Myrtle did not know that her husband was treating a member of the royal family. Preparations for the coronation ceremony were in full swing. For Bertie, this was a very serious step, the entire process while being filmed. At the insistence of the king, Lionel would also be present at the coronation. Bertie ordered that a place be allocated for Lionel in the royal box with the family members. The archbishop was puzzled by this request. Later, after asking all outsiders to leave the hall for the coronation, Bertie told Lionel directly that he had learned the truth about him. It turned out that Lionel had no diploma or qualification, only boundless audacity. Lionel is actually an actor, however he has long practiced helping to correct the speech of soldiers after a contusion. Lionel has no certificate, but he has the practice and experience the war gave him. Bertie was in despair, convinced that no one could help him. He was deeply outraged to see Lionel sitting on the royal throne. Unable to control his emotions, Bertie expressed everything he thought about Lionel. After calming down, Bertie realized that he spoke without stuttering during those moments. The archbishop approached and offered to replace Lionel with a certified specialist, but Bertie refused.
Thank you, Bertie.
They rehearsed the speech for the coronation ceremony for a long time. In the evening, the royal family watched Hitler's public speeches. With his speeches he made millions of people blindly follow him. Soon the prime minister asked the king for an audience to report his resignation. He honestly admitted that he was frightened by the impending war. It turns out Winston Churchill was right about the true intentions of the leader of Germany. On September 3, 1939, Lionel's family heard on the radio that Britain was now at war with Germany. Meanwhile, the king was brought a long speech that he was to deliver on air during his address to the nation and military personnel. Lionel was driving down the street with his son Laurie. People were panicking, afraid of bombings. Lionel met with Bertie to prepare him for his upcoming radio broadcast. As the king, Bertie realized he had no real power. In reality, the ministers made all the decisions and Bertie was simply the voice of the nation and had to speak on its behalf. The time for the live broadcast had come. This is a great moment. Winston Churchill told the king that he too had speech defects in childhood, but he was able to overcome it over time. Bertie was more nervous than ever before. The Queen was next to her husband to support him. Before the broadcast, Bertie thanked Lionel for everything he had done. The friend advised the king to forget that he was being listened to by all of Great Britain and to just speak. Despite all his fears and doubts, Bertie began to give a 9-minute speech. At that moment, millions of people were listening to him, including David, the mother and soldiers. Elizabeth was very proud of her husband. When the speech was over, everyone applauded and congratulated the king. Bertie felt immense relief. The king thanked his only friend again for his help. Elizabeth kissed her husband, whom she had always believed in. The advisors continued to congratulate His Majesty. He hugged his daughters, as family support was the most important thing to him. Now Bertie was not worried at all before speaking in public. The subjects greeted the royal family. The voiceover then tells us about the real heroes of this story. In gratitude, the king dedicated Lionel as a knight. They remained friends until the end of their lives.